My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. Look, it's some variety in the type of games Nickelodeon is releasing. After clearly being scared to invest significant resources into anything other than Rugrats, Nickelodeon is booming and is now open to using their other shows as cash cows. Nicktoons Racing was a celebration of all things Nick, and now the Wild Thornberrys are getting their very first home console game. Titled Animal Adventures, this was released exclusively for the PlayStation 1 on November 8, 2000. I think. I know I regularly talk about how there's very little information available for games I cover on Video Game History, particularly the older ones, but this is next level. I just don't have any info available for this game. No wiki pages of any kind exist for it, the release date is kind of hard to find, and I'm surprised the game's developer is even listed online. In charge of development was No Wonder. They have a much more interesting history than I first realised when I brought them up briefly in previous videos, although unearthing that history is quite murky. Starting in the mid-90s, No Wonder was heavily focused on PC games. This is where I've mentioned them before, as they developed the PC version of Rugrats in Paris and the PC exclusive sequel to Totally Angelica. In 1999 they acquired the Seattle division of Real Time Associates. You'll know Real Time Associates as the company behind the Real Monsters game and Rugrats Scavenger Hunt. After picking up that team, No Wonder almost immediately underwent a rebrand. The company was renamed Amaze Entertainment and split the developers into two teams. Real Time Associates' Seattle division became Kryptonite Games, and they would focus on handheld titles. The pre-existing PC-focused team would be called Adrenium Games, who you'll know as the developer of the underrated Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku. The later history of this company becomes even more confusing because there's like another 3 or 4 times where the company would be bought or sold. All you really need to know is that they have had plenty of experience working with Nickelodeon throughout their history. With no real background info or reviews to go off of, I have no idea what I'm getting into with Animal Adventures. This game has truly been lost to time, so let's unearth some history and see if we can't find a smashing hidden gem. Playing Animal Adventures, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was supposed to be the console version of Rambler, which was released on the Game Boy Color. The structure of the game is quite literally identical. Levels are spread out across a bunch of locations around the world, with most levels having completely different gameplay. Animal Adventures' structure really only differs in one major area. Each location features 2 levels rather than just 1. It is a big bad beefed up home console game after all. So yeah, we basically just have Rambler in console form, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, just a confusing thing. The actual structure and setup for that game wasn't the problem, it was the execution. What is strange is that this game is so similar, yet doesn't share the same name or developer, and it released like 3 months after the handheld game. Before you even get to experience all of that, you're treated to a nice intro cutscene that basically just recreates the show's intro, but in the 3D style of the game. It's really neat, and the care for the presentation doesn't end there. I've gushed previously about some of the Rugrats games that had plenty of cutscenes and voice work, but Animal Adventures is next level. There's a cutscene to start and finish every level in the game. These aren't brief either, they're all pretty beefy, complete with voice acting and writing that wouldn't be out of place in an episode. I really cannot fault the dedication and effort that went into making this feel like an authentic Wild Thornberrys experience. Well, I did take issue with one of the lines of dialogue from Nigel.
Behold, Tasmania!
Behold boredom!
Oh, Tasmania is far from boring.
Sorry Nigel, but as an Australian I'm gonna have to disagree. We pretty much have unanimously agreed here that Tasmania is boring as fuck. The cutscenes and writing are great, but we're not here to watch the show, we're here to play a video game. Putting such love and care into those presentation and visual aspects is why I was so disappointed with those similar areas for the gameplay. The gameplay feels so low budget in pretty much every aspect compared to the cutscenes. It's visually uninteresting and not at all what I was expecting. Most of the minigames in Animal Adventures are a complete waste of some cool 3D models. Also weird is the fact that Nigel and Marianne never get used in the gameplay. Essentially, what we have here for this game is another minigame compilation. I'm fully aware that this is more of a me issue, But God, I am so sick of this style of game. Nickelodeon just keeps churning out games in this exact style, and the fact that I'm playing all of these Nickelodeon games in a row is obviously making that feel even more repetitive. But I'm sorry, I just can't get super excited about seeing another Nickelodeon game where they jump from gameplay idea to gameplay idea. I'm absolutely screaming for one cohesive console game to be made at this point. I kickstarted my journey with this game in Tasmania. This level sees you play as Darwin trying to rock climb out of a chasm. Initially, I was actually a little bit intrigued by this. The D-pad controls the left hand and the face buttons control the right hand as you climb. For example, to grab a rock to your right, you'd need to press the circle button, but if you wanted Darwin to grab the rock above you, you'd need to press triangle. It's a divisive game, but Death Stranding implemented a similar system for keeping balance while making deliveries, and I greatly enjoyed that. However, there's no mistaking that there are very tedious moments in that game stemming directly from its unique control system. This minigame is basically all of the worst parts with none of the good. Climbing here is so tedious. You're constantly mashing the buttons like a madman to get Darwin moving, and you're forced to be quick because these bats are flying around. One hit from those and you'll go plummeting, requiring you to make the climb again. It's not fun, particularly when all the button mashing starts giving you forearm and wrist cramps. It's unfathomably poor design. The first level in Colombia is sort of similar as you're climbing across vines. The big difference is it uses a much simpler control scheme, making it much more bearable to play. Sure, it's still not good, but I wasn't tearing my hair out over the fundamental controls, and it wasn't physically hurting me. None of the other levels here are as unique as that first one I played in Tasmania. The one level I'd describe as bearable is the second level in Egypt. This is a puzzle section where you're trying to activate switches as Donnie, which open doors to escape a series of rooms. It's a pretty stock standard idea, but it's executed well. The puzzles are thought out logically, and I can imagine this would be a nice challenge for kids, trying to figure out those little hints that the game gives you. Hell, this gameplay probably could have been extended to an entire game. Having the family solve puzzles in different locations sounds pretty cool, especially if you gave each member of the family unique abilities that you could combine together in the solutions. But instead of that, we get revolutionary ideas such as Frogger. There are 2 entire levels dedicated to playing what is literally just Frogger. If I actually wanted to play Frogger, I would have just picked up the PS1 release. Similarly, in the second level of Belize, you're just playing Snake. I mean, it's a perfectly fine clone of Snake, it's not technically bad or anything, but really guys, it's just so bland and they force you to play it for a long time. The time it takes you to beat this level is way longer than anybody has ever willingly played Snake for. There's a memory-based minigame where you have to follow some dance moves and a janky platformer starring Debbie. It's supposed to be made difficult by the presence of these seagulls attacking you, but in my experience they'd attack you once, not really do anything, and then just disappear, allowing you to platform in peace. The rest of the levels in Animal Adventures pretty much boil down to some variation of guide a character safely through a maze. There are small tweaks to this between them, but at the end of the day you're mostly just wandering through a level trying not to get touched by a bad animal. But then I started to get this awful sinking feeling, a feeling that something awful was about to happen, almost like I was in danger. I couldn't figure out why I was feeling like this, so I proceeded onwards to Iceland. And then it hit me. There's another mini golf game here. How? Why can I not escape the drudgery of mini golf? It's mini golf. It's already a spiced up version of golf. There's nothing else you can add to make this interesting. The worst part is that it's easily the most boring of all the mini golf games I've played so far. It's 9 holes of absolute peak monotony. The one saving grace is that failing a hole doesn't make you start all the way back at the beginning, like every other poorly designed level here. Outside of the uninspired gameplay, this checkpointing is one of the biggest issues. So many of the levels are long, tedious slogs, made even worse by the fact that if you fail, you start from square one. In the vine climbing Colombian level, I climbed across like 5 different sections, died, and then had to repeat this section from scratch. It's not fun.
Could this be any more annoying?
To make matters worse, every failure is greeted with a loading screen. Emulation generally makes these loading screens a flash, but even with this modern technology, it was extremely annoying to sit through this every time. I can't imagine how much worse it would have been on an actual PS1. I just can't get excited by games in this format anymore. It was cute when Rugrats first did it and the studio tour aesthetic was nice, but it has become a crutch for developers now. There's no reason why Rugrats in Paris needed to be a minigame compilation, and the Wild Thornberrys is a show ripe for so many better genres. I think my puzzle game idea I mentioned would be a way more enjoyable game. Or what about a 3D platformer? A Wild Thornberrys 3D platformer in the style of Spyro basically writes itself. The family is always travelling to unique locations, so just throw the characters in smallish 3D environments based on these countries and let me do 3D platformer shit. I'm honestly tired of developers not wanting to put in the work to make a cohesive game. Slapping together a minigame compilation is always the easiest route to take. Please, Nickelodeon, just give me something interesting to play. The Wild Thornberrys Animal Adventures is a classic example of beauty only being skin deep. I love the cutscenes, voice acting, and writing. So much care has been put into it to make it an authentic Thornberrys experience. But then you get to the gameplay and it's the complete opposite. Rather than developing unique gameplay to take advantage of the unique strengths of this TV show, we just get clones of old arcade games and a bunch of levels where you walk through a maze. It's just so bland, and that's probably what makes me the most angry. I would much rather see Animal Adventures take a chance on a unique gameplay idea and create an absolute disaster in the process, than see them release a bunch of stale minigame ideas and make this lukewarm ass game. This was the one and only console game Wild Thornberrys would receive, so it's more than a little bit annoying that this was what was served up. There's still a few handheld games to come, including 2 based on their 2 theatrical movies, but they'll never make up for their one console game being a big miss. Next time will be a momentous occasion for this series. We'll be reviewing SpongeBob SquarePants: Legend of the Lost Spatula. This is the Yellow Sponge's solo debut in Nickelodeon video game history, which would lead to almost 20 games released over the past 20 years. Will the debut of SpongeBob in video game form be a smash hit like the show was, or will it sink to the bottom of the ocean? Make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next video.